Hello, everyone. It's Nick from A Longer Life here, and I am joined by co-founder and CEO at Kineon, Forrest Smith. We've been chatting with each other for a couple of years about red light therapy, and I'm excited to talk today a bit about the new Kineon Move Pro, which I'll tease around in the video here shortly. Welcome.
Great. It's always great to see you, and I'm looking forward to an awesome discussion. You always have the best questions, and we're going to dive in and peel back the onion for everybody here today.
Yeah, it's interesting when you take the time to actually do some research and understand the science and really get into the values and the mission and the people behind a company before you start recommending it to your audience. Interesting things happen, like good questions. So thank you for that, Forrest. You're reflecting my entire ethos.
100%. I feel like it kind of pervades everything you do. Everything's really well thought out, and again, I'm super excited about all of the questions and diving in on this with you today.
Great. All right. First up, let's talk Kineon Move Pro. We're on the third iteration there, right? It was the Move, then it was the Move Plus, now it's the Move Pro. What's the latest in this model, and how is it going to take our recovery and injury healing even further? Discuss all these key improvements. There's got to be a bullet.
I love it. So the first thing I would say is, and our team gives me a hard time about this, but I think it's so important. It informs everything we do. We're a mission-driven company, and our mission is to improve the quality of life for the largest number of people we can in the most measurable way we can. And started a number of businesses. In my entire adult life has been building startups and exiting them. And what we wanted to do with and are doing with Kineon is, instead of building a company to exit, let's make something where our measurable metric that we hold ourselves to is something that's really systemically impactful. And we've got over 50,000 devices out there in the world now, keeping people away from pharmaceuticals and more damaging interventions when they're in pain or trying to recover, or just getting them back into movement. That's the focus for our new Pro version of the Move Plus. We've taken on very strong input from our user base, yourself included. I have to give you some good credit on flagging with us some of the things that were friction points for using the device. So I think our key focus for the Pro is really making this something that people feel comfortable and happy about using every day. And so the strap system has been upgraded, and we've made some really strong improvements on the straps. The modules, it's a modular device, and so sometimes the modules would become unsynced as well. We've got a one-button push for syncing the modules back together. So they turn on, you push one button, they all turn on. We're releasing an app in the next month that will support this as well. That is going to offer people a really good ability, and if they'd like to have kind of nudges about not having used it when they should be using it from a consistency standpoint, there'll be nudges available, and there'll be a tracking system for that. And I think one of the other things that's really worth pointing out is the arrangements that you can make these in now from the strapping system. You can actually move the straps from vertical to horizontal and make different arrangements around different limbs. Personally, I treat my neck, and I can tell you a little bit as to why, but my neck and my gut every day, we've seen some really powerful impact from that, both personally and from my own anecdotal story. But we've also worked with a Japanese lab who developed that, what they call the proximal priority therapy, and the research they have on the systemic input and reduction of inflammation and what that does from an immune system, from improving neurotransmitter generation, and just from general health and wellness. It's just been amazing. So all that to say, there's some really big updates on this new product, and including the dosing model. We have updated the dosing model, which is kind of our key technology. What drives the outcomes with photobiomodulation or light therapy is having the correct amount of photons at the correct level of depth of tissue in the right wavelength. And so we continue to invest in our research there and update our models and our dosing based on what we see as impacting health and wellness outcomes as much as possible for our users. So that was
Big
a lot
answer
of
there.
Points,
Big answer there for us, but it's because you're passionate and you love what you're doing, and you've got to tell us the why behind it. And trust me, I get it. I'm here. That's why we're having this conversation. And so, this little unit here that is seemingly so simple, putting out this red light. And you can see it's quite bright when I shine at the camera. I mean, this thing it's a bright light. And this light is penetrating very deeply because of your design. And we can talk a little bit about that. But the thing that you're really emphasizing in your mission is you want to keep people moving. You want to keep people away from pharmaceutical solutions and back into being able to move their body, reduce pain, actually engage with things like arthritis, chronic inflammation. Talk to us about how the Move Plus Pro changes people's relationship with pain, particularly in their joints, because there's a powerful story there.
It's a great question. I think one of the things that we see so often these days is that people take a pain signal as a stop sign. And this isn't necessarily what you should be doing. There are times when you have an injury and you have to be able to stop to let your body recover and rebuild that. But one of the things that we've seen really across a number of different types of chronic pain and inflammation, and particularly when it's chronic inflammation over months and years, is that if you can reduce that inflammation, what you find is that people can actually get back into movement, but they need coaching into that. And they need some level of understanding that, the takeaway that from a marketing standpoint that you hear about this is motion is lotion. You may hear that from your physicians or your PT or your chiropractor, et cetera, but it's the truth. What we see right now is if you stop moving, or if in another case, and we see this very often with our older users, you're the frog being boiled in the hot water. And by that, I mean the kind of old adage about boiling the frog. If you put a frog into warm water and then slowly turn up the heat, it never jumps out and it just gets cooked. We look at pain and movement like this. And so what we see with our older users is that they'll start reducing the amount of steps taken, the distance walked, the amount of exercise they do on a daily basis because of the pain they're in without really realizing it. And so they're that frog being boiled. They don't really realize that they're kind of in this position that's going to reduce the amount of muscle mass they have. That's going to, sarcopenia is a really, really dangerous thing for our older users. That's going to provide less stability, more likelihood of falls, more likelihood of mortality because of that. So it's a very slippery slope when you start thinking about the impacts of pain and people not moving. So what you can do with infrared light particularly is penetrate deep into these tissues and reduce that inflammation. And when you start reducing the inflammation, the pain decreases and you reverse that same process. And so you start getting people back into movement. And that movement really helps with a more regenerative approach to cartilage that may have been degrading over time with pathologies like osteoarthritis. But really getting people back into movement is the key. When you start using your body and moving, you can regenerate tissue, soft tissue, and see a reversal of these long-term chronic pain and inflammation issues.
Yes, I say to my audience, if you tell your body to be strong, it will listen. And you keep what you train. Those two really key points are wrapped up in what you've just described, and how important it is for older individuals in particular to keep moving. And often you said at the beginning that pain can be interpreted as a stop sign. That is not always the case. Certain types of pain certainly are a stop sign. We might need an expert to help us determine what's a stop sign and what's is actually keep going. Actually, if you could get stronger, this pain might go away. And I really see that that's where this device can really start to play a powerful role in helping people get some of that inflammation flushed out, get some of that pain down so they can start moving again, build some strength up, keep their muscle mass up. And you mentioned that in particular, the near infrared light is really powerful for this purpose. In this device, in the Kineon Move Plus Pro, you have a 660 nanometer deep red light. I noticed that shifted to a little bit longer wavelength than some of the topical light spectrum items, which might be more around 600. And then you have an 808 nanometer infrared light. So that would actually be a near infrared, right? Correct? Yep. And what are these actually doing for our joints? When I put this on my knee, my sore shoulder, what is it about these two wavelengths that create this biological response that can be so powerful for pain and inflammation?
That's an excellent question. We see a combination of things. So we spend tens of thousands of hours mapping mathematically how these photons are distributed through the tissue. And in the tissue, it depends on how you count it. There's different academic views to this, but either 8 or 9 different photoacceptors that we trigger with these 2 different wavelengths. We know where those photoacceptors are. And to give a couple of examples of those, there's one embedded in the mitochondria called cytochrome C oxidase. Hemoglobin, which is a carrier molecule in your blood, is another one. There are calcium ion channels and different ion channels that control movement of fluid and pressure in and out of your cells. So there's a number of different things that are triggered. What we do with our models is we build full mathematical models showing how these photons contribute electrons to these different photoacceptors. When you trigger these photoacceptors, there are downstream impacts. And again, there's a lot of biochemistry behind this, but I think a few of the ones that are worth noting are when you're triggering hemoglobin, nitric oxide splits away from hemoglobin, and you see your blood vessels open up. Nitric oxide is a powerful vasodilator, and you see the blood vessels open up, and you deliver more blood through those. When you trigger that nitric oxide to unbind from the hemoglobin, that binding site also opens up for oxygen to bind there. So not only are you delivering more blood, you're delivering more oxygenated blood to the area. This increases the level of aerobic respiration in your cells, and you can actually see the levels of energy increase with these. These are synergistic with what you see from the mitochondrial standpoint as well. So your mitochondrial ATP is kind of the currency of energy for our bodies, and our ATP productions go up by about 70% over 8 to 12 hours when we're using these type of infrared in particular. But the combination of those 2 wavelengths essentially is red treating your more superficial tissue, and then the infrared treating your internal tissue. And we combine these, particularly the infrared, as lasers, because lasers are actually collimated, so a little bit more direct and less spread on the laser than you would see from like an LED. With the red, we actually do use an LED because it's only treating the more superficial tissue, but that balance of those allows us to calculate and then execute on how effectively we're delivering the right level of photons to the right photoacceptors to trigger the best outcomes from pain reduction, blood delivery, inflammation reduction, cellular level improvements in energy generation, and reduced oxidative stress. And those are all really well documented from a research standpoint, and are also just major impacts for your body. There's just, stress, oxidative stress and inflammation are really kind of the fountainhead of so many different pathologies. It's crazy.
Yeah, Forrest, there's a long list that you just put in there in terms of benefits. Our audience has actually been being introduced to many of these, including that mitochondrial energy function role for red light therapy recently. We've been looking at it in terms of how it can help the skin, how red light and near infrared light can help with circadian rhythm. And you've mentioned a whole nother list of things that are really powerful, particularly in joints, in terms of improving blood flow with nitric oxide balance. There's also the benefits that we've spoken about before in terms of the differentiation of stem cells into the building blocks of bone and soft tissue. Could you add just a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that you see with chronic joint issues, and I'll stay with osteoarthritis just because it's the most deeply researched, but there are a number of different inflammation-mediated pathologies like this that degrade your tissue and cause joint pain and degradation over time. There's a couple of things that we see with red light therapy that actually really help with this. So you'd like your body to be in a homeostasis of generating new soft tissue and degrading old soft tissue. What happens when you have a high level of inflammation in your joints, and this can be triggered by a number of things, by small injuries, knee sprains, by larger injuries. I've got an old meniscus tear that really generates ongoing inflammation, decades later. What happens with that inflammation? 3 main things. One is local impacts. you see that homeostasis go out of whack. You start degrading your soft tissue faster than you can regrow it. So when you can reduce that inflammation, it can reduce that level of degradation of your soft tissue. And I'm saying soft tissue, it's essentially cartilage that we're talking about mostly in the knees, but cartilage and ligaments and your connective tissue in your joints. So it's not just your knees, but again, the knees and osteoarthritis are the most heavily researched. So it's good examples from the medical field to be able to refer to. But reducing those ongoing inflammation triggers for degradation of that tissue allows you to get back to that homeostasis or even go above it. And why would you go above it? So there's a couple other things that happen aside from the inflammation reduction. One is you have fast growing cells at the front end of how you grow your soft tissue called chondroblasts. And with bones, we see a very similar thing with osteoblasts. But these, even though they're the fastest growing cells in this soft tissue, they still grow relatively slowly. And they grow your tissue even more slowly because you generate these chondroblasts and then they generate an entire web of mesh that is essentially called the extracellular matrix, which becomes the soft tissue, this cartilage in your knees that is kind of holding you up and keeping you from having bone on bone. When you can increase the level of growth of those chondroblasts and increase their level of generation of this extracellular matrix or that matting, that kind of fibrous matting that is your cartilage, this actually gets you back into being able to overgenerate this. And if you have things where you're not necessarily quite to bone on bone, but you've had degradation and you're starting to feel pain from this. By the time you feel pain for osteoarthritis, you're already way down the road. Like this is not tissue that you should be feeling pain from generally. There are very few ways in the world to be able to intervene in that and regrow that tissue. And photobiomodulation is one. And what we've seen recently over the past 3 to 4 years is that it's also one that stacks incredibly well with the other ones. So stem cells, and you mentioned specifically how stem cells self-select. So these mesenchymal stem cells self-select into becoming different types of cells. When you hit them with infrared, and particularly 808 nanometer, they self-select into becoming chondroblasts, those fast-growing cartilage cells at a much higher rate. And so when you see that, and then in the next step, when they're generating that matting, that extracellular matrix, they're generating it at a much faster rate. So these are things that can really impact positively the joint health long term. We're also seeing a lot of we're working with hundreds, I think 600 or 700 different clinics now to get the devices out and on their patients. And they've been seeing amazing results with platelet-rich plasma, stacks very well with it. And that's a whole other biochemistry kind of lesson in of itself as to why. But stem cells, platelet-rich plasma, and shockwave therapy, so extracorporeal shockwave therapy, all mediate really powerful impacts on the joint tissue, but they're mediating it through different signaling pathways than light therapy. And so they stack synergistically with these, and you just see really, really incredible stories for even people up into their 80s starting to regrow this tissue meaningfully, and great data where you can kind of actually come in and see the claims justified for that. So we spend a lot of time with our physicians and clinicians trying to dive back in and understand objectively how is this impacting separate from kind of baseline and then other treatments, and then stacking the photobiomodulation or laser therapy on top of that just makes a really powerful impact.
So, given all the caveats and details you just put out there for this question that I want to ask you, I want a very succinct answer here. Can red light therapy regrow cartilage in a joint?
Yes. And that's
yes.
You heard a bunch of caveats, but
and it can do so much more powerfully when combined with other complementary therapies. And of course, that would mean we need to be strengthening the muscles around those joints. We need to be, the motion is lotion for those joints. It's not just going to be a sit on the couch and regrow your cartilage type tool, but people who feel like their joints are irrecoverably gone, they could be very surprised by the Kineon Move Plus Pro. And you've said just that people are very surprised by the benefits they see. Is there an anecdote or a story you could add to illustrate that point?
I'm a big baby, so you're going to make me cry on camera, but we get 60, 70, 80-year-old people who couldn't walk up the stairs and are now out jogging again, who couldn't sleep through the night from chronic pain and are now sleeping through the night. This is we're a mission driven company, and we share these in our Slack channels internally. But this is why I come to work every day. This is exactly the outcomes. It's great. We work with a lot of like NFL and NBA, and it's really awesome being around great athletes. But there's something special about seeing someone extend their lifespan, extend their health span, give themselves more years of health and the family knock-on effects for that. For me, that's what kind of brings me to work every day.
It does bring you work every day. It brings me to work every day. That's the future I want people to see. And the thing I would add to that, Forrest, is that having a heart and being driven by it as a man in the world and being courageous enough to show your emotion, that's actually real masculinity. So I compliment you for that.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. And I love seeing that come through, and that your team sharing these stories, they're innumerable. And in fact, I at one point circulated about 10 of these devices to our audience, and we got very similar types of feedback. So this is a really, really powerful tool. And I think we've got some upgrades from even the version that our audience tests that I really want to come back to, actually. Let's talk some nerd stuff here. Now that we've got the mission, the big picture, let's talk about stats. All right. Somebody who says, oh, I've got a Move, Kineon Move from 2 years ago. I don't need this Move Plus Pro, but there's some upgrades here. Let's talk about, from engineering perspective, some of those differences in optical power, wavelength, penetration depth. What's the updates?
So the updates from the dosing standpoint is that I mentioned earlier that we do these Monte Carlo models, and what we didn't want to happen with our photon modeling for how these photons are delivered through tissue was that we make an ivory tower mathematical model, and then we say, oh, this is great, but we never go test it. Our work and our mission is not to create great mathematical models, is to change people's lives. And so what we've done, I think we're on the 37th iteration now, is we create our model, and then we have set biometrics that we can measure in people's tissue. And so we say, out of this, here's what our model says we should see, and here's what we're actually seeing. Let's hold ourselves accountable for what reality is. What's caused this gap? And then how do we reduce this gap? And we've spent, again, 37 or 38 cycles doing that, and the gap's gotten very, very small. And so that's the key, is driving outcomes for people by dosing them as effectively as possible to their photoreceptors at the right depth. And we continue to hold ourselves accountable for that by doing ongoing testing with a number of different labs around the world. We've actually added in a couple of different lab tests. There's been, and it's an amazing time to be alive from a technology standpoint. While we've had the company over the last 3 years shipping product, there's been 3 new types of mitochondrial tests that have come out and validated what we're doing. Early tests, we use metrics just like what they call serum nitric oxide, which is essentially how much nitric oxide is in your blood. And we knew what we wanted, and we knew what we were getting, and so we could go make the engineering changes for those. But the biggest engineering changes that we've made is introducing new biomarkers and new tests to be able to dial this in across multiple biomarkers and really give ourselves a higher resolution of testing and outcomes for what we're delivering. And so I love it. I would talk your ear off about this all day, because there's a lot of kind of wrinkles from the science standpoint for it. But what that means for our users is that we're just delivering world-class, the best dosing out of a photobiomodulation device that you can get. And I have to say at this point, and I don't think I'm breaking my arm, patting myself on the back, I haven't seen clinical devices at this level of testing and the feedback loop that's gone into the tens of thousands of hours of research and validation that we've put into the Move Plus Pro. And it's an exciting thing to do, because the more we put into it, the tighter and tighter that gets from a dosing standpoint. And it's just great, because you can now, we are now at a 99+% positive outcome for really everything that we make claims across, and it's just been validated to the nth degree. So that's been exciting over the past few years to expand out on that and just see, people getting a the highest probability of the best outcome they can get from a non-pharmaceutical solution.
Right. Beautiful. And so in terms of the Kineon Move to the Move Plus to the Move Plus Pro that I'm holding in my hand now, you're iterating on the dosing that the light, the whole dosing model for the light to the tissue to activate all the great biological impacts that can occur for the benefits we want. And then you're validating those, right? So you're iterating through. So when we look at the stats for this guy and we see the adjustments you've made to wavelength or optical power or penetration depth or the nature of the pulsed light, those are all reflective of what you've just described. Those are the tweaks you're making to make it work even better.
That's exactly right. Typically, and just to kind of put a little color on that without going too far down the biochemistry rabbit hole, typically what you see is what they call pulse width modulation characteristics that can be changed. We've actually changed a couple of other things as well with the power levels. So typically it's very difficult to change power levels. You change the pulse, you change the length of the pulse, you change the frequency of the pulse, and that's why it's called pulse width modulation. We're actually able to change without changing hardware, which is one of the things we've kind of put some patents around in the near term. Change the power levels as we're going through this as well, without having those necessarily be driven just by the pulsing character.
Okay, so a lot of engineering there and some serious nerd power, which we're glad you have you and your team working on for the rest of us who don't necessarily understand light the way that you do. And you gave us a really great answer before about the impact that this device can have on the regrowing of cartilage, which is really exciting. We talked about how that's helping to accomplish the mission. I'd like to kind of go now into really a few practical questions that people have that need some short, really succinct answers. So not full of necessarily all the science, but are just a nice brief answer. This is what I called those rapid fire questions that I briefed you on. And the first one relates to what you were just talking about in one way, is that how deeply does the Kineon Move Plus Pro penetrate? And I imagine you could answer that in terms of the two different wavelengths of light.
So with the red, you're down to about 2 centimeters. With the infrared, you're up to about 3 inches. And that's at the meaningful doses. So, it actually penetrates further than both of those. It goes down, every centimeter in for the red, for example, it goes down an order of magnitude in dose. But what we see is we're making meaningful impacts from a dosing standpoint at 3 inches and at about 2 centimeters, respectively, for the infrared and red.
Okay. And then also another very simple question and follow up to that is, how do you use the Kineon Move Plus Pro in terms of how it's placed on the body?
So I'll give you my examples of how I use it on a daily basis. I treat the 2 largest blood vessels in my body that are very accessible from just beneath the skin in your neck. So your carotid. And I treat this for 15 minutes. And I treat my lower gut for 15 minutes. I also have injuries that flare up. So my back was injured, is still slightly injured. So my back flares up. I treat that for 15 minutes. My knee flares up. I'm 46 this year. And have not stopped playing rugby or CrossFit, which is maybe questionable decisions. At least my wife thinks. But the impact for those is great. You're back into training and playing very quickly. My ongoing treatment that we've found, and we started developing this treatment with a lab partner out in Japan that's done a huge amount of research on this, is again treating these blood vessels and treating your lower gut, because this is what's known as abscopal or remote photobiomodulation. You're treating one area of the body and you're seeing impacts elsewhere. And this is a really good combination for being able to increase dopamine, serotonin, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and improve your immune health, just in a word, if that makes sense.
Okay, so you're talking about using it in multiple locations for different applications, including on the neck. You mentioned on the back. So I imagine that when you're trying to treat a joint or a site of pain for local impacts, you're going to have that device, you're going to want it to be as flush with the skin as possible. And you're going to want the other 2 modules that I'm not holding in the strap, nearby that area of pain? Just give me some very practical directions.
Absolutely. So, with the knee as an example, what you'd like to do is arrange the modules so that they overlap their beams of output where the pain point is. And so, with that, you can put one horizontal module in the back and then two vertical ones in the front of your knee. One of the things that we found really drives the best outcomes for knees is if you have it at a 90-degree angle, you have two channels that are on either side and slightly below your patella. Those offer you direct access into your synovial capsule, which is where that inflammation is causing havoc, for lack of a better term. If you have your knee flat, we have a 40 to 50% hit rate on the pain reduction and inflammation reduction. We do a lot of follow-up surveys because it's important for us with our mission to measure what's happening with our users. When you have the knee at a 90-degree angle and have that channel through to that synovial fluid to be able to treat the inflammation directly, we see a 95% plus hit rate on reduced pain and inflammation. So that's a big one for us, is just to make sure that people have the device directly on their skin and have it pointed at the direct area that's going to provide them the best outcomes. There's a couple other parts of the body that actually we've done some really strong follow-up on as well. One that would also say that you don't really need to treat just the local tissue is we see a lot of golf and tennis elbow. And, a lot of people playing pickleball, golf, tennis, this type of thing. Racket sports have been very popular recently. We had 85% hit rate, which is not within our acceptable range. And so we did a very strong follow-up on this and found that a lot of the elbow pain that we were seeing, we could go from mid 80% in resolution to over 98% by also adding the shoulder and then between the shoulder blade and spine. And so this is a lot of it's referred pain. So you have pain that's not necessarily just from the local tissue. And when you can treat these other areas, you see a massive increase or improvement in the outcome. So we have a lot of protocols on this on our site, and we've done a bit of publishing both academically and with our blogs on how to use these protocols as effectively as possible.
Okay, so a nice answer then might be, if you're looking for the way to use the Kineon Move Plus Pro, that we would be looking for the protocols that you provide on your website for specific troubles like tennis elbow or like a sore knee.
That's right. And in your box, when you get the device there's a code you can scan, and it'll take you to a full page of, what hurts, what should I do, and then we have videos and instructionals on all of that, just to make sure that people are getting the best outcomes they possibly can.
Okay, so key question here: how fast will the Kineon Move Plus Pro work? How long until I feel the benefits from this treatment?
The inflammation is almost instantaneous. You see within 15 to 30 minutes a reduced inflammation, and particularly if it's a swelling or an edema-based inflammation, it's very, very fast. With as an example, ankle injuries. We see this with our NBA players a lot. Ankle injuries, it balloons up. Ice is not a very good solution for that. And there's not great other solutions for this. And people have just been shocked at how fast you can get that swelling back down. With that said, that's kind of the shortest we see is, again, kind of almost immediately after treatment, you're starting to see the swelling come down and the pain go down and people get back into some kind of movement. The longest we see is 5 to 6 weeks for osteoarthritis of the hands. And what drives that is there's just less tissue for us to interact with there. And so we try to be very upfront about the expectation levels that we set with people. If you have osteoarthritis of your hands, we have a 30-day guarantee for money back, no questions asked. We will extend that for you if you have osteoarthritis of your hands, or if you have any other pathology where it's going to need a longer period of time than the 30 days. And so, again, we try to be very upfront, and we also spend a lot of time interacting with and talking with our users about this. So, we try to do as much education and interaction as we can.
Okay. You've mentioned a couple different ways to use the Move Plus Pro now. So The question, where can the Move Plus Pro be used on the body, might be a broader question than where can't it be. So could you give us some general guidance?
So I think the best results we see are from inflammation. So if you have areas where you know you have inflammation, again, for me, that's lower back. I tweak it from deadlifts or something like this, some kind of power cleans. Knee, the old meniscus tear. I know where my points of inflammation kind of exist. Those are great places to start. The other places that you're going to see really good impacts are sometimes where you don't expect to see inflammation. And so one of the things that we've seen, again, with the neck and the lower gut treatments is a lot more people, because of diet, because of lack of movement and training, and because of environmental factors, endocrine disruptors. There's so many things that are really creating inflammation in our system right now. We see leaky gut and we see impacts of inflammation out of the gut so much. It's endemic now. It's one of those things that you just can't get away from. And the treatment, the 808 nanometer, the red lights won't penetrate in that far, but the 808 nanometer actually does and reduces inflammation in the gut. And we see really powerful outcomes for people who are seeing their leaky gut shore up, who start seeing immune and autoimmune impacts from that. Your gut's at the center of so many different processes in your body. It's really, again, kind of, what is it not impacting? So brain impacts for neurotransmitters, and we see those present in both in the literature and from our anecdotal and user cases, where people are increasing their mood, less brain fog, really seeing powerful outcomes from about 2 weeks on for treating, again, the neck and the lower gut. And then the autoimmune impacts have just been crazy. We're working on a couple of different studies now on multiple sclerosis and asthma. And both of those are really severe autoimmune disorders. And we're seeing very positive outcomes from treating the gut. And so all of that to say, really anywhere in the body that does have inflammation, whether it's something that you know about because your knee is swelling or your ankle swelling, or that you don't know about, try treating your gut, try treating your blood through your neck, and see if you're seeing within 10 to 12 to 14 days an uplift in what they call affect, or really your mood and energy levels, because those neurotransmitters that you generate in your brain and gut, like serotonin, dopamine, and the BDNF, really have a powerful impact on how you feel and how your cognitive performance is on a daily basis.
Right. And so that was actually one of the closing questions I had, was you projecting where this treatment is going in the future. And you mentioned two things. You mentioned the brain and you mentioned the gut. There's a third one, which is actually some interactions, very early stage, around red light and the vagus nerve. So just fill in the blanks there in terms of what you just told us, in terms of where this type of treatment might go in the future, or where products that we might be seeing from Kineon might go in the future, insofar as you can tell us your secrets.
Absolutely. And hopefully I get too excited about it, so you're going to have to hold me back from telling secrets here. We are launching a new modular device for specifically gut and brain. And this is called the Heal Plus. And essentially it's 4 wavelengths of laser. Again, our core technology is around how light propagates through the body and how do we deliver it at the right level of depth to the right tissue with the right photoacceptors there. Gut and brain is a little bit deeper than we see on average for the joints. And so, and if you've got a very thick skull like me, then it's even harder to get photons in there. But what we do see with this is that by adding these 2 longer wavelengths, so we were 660 and 808 for the joints, and that's been incredibly effective. We're adding in 940 and 1064, and those actually penetrate further into the tissue and help us to have a better dispersal of the photons in a pattern that actually really works well for deeper tissue like gut and brain. And the outcomes from early tests for this are incredible. Again, we're working with different labs around the world to be able to dial this in around different pathologies. But one of the biggest things is just reducing systemic inflammation, increasing neurovascular delivery and efficacy in the brain, and then also really helping people stay away from one of the things that we're seeing right now with many different brain pathologies, and those can be behavioral pathologies like ADHD, major depressive disorder, anxiety, or they can be full, deep dementia levels or Alzheimer's levels pathologies, is that these are very, very highly linked with microvascular and neurovascular performance. And we've not seen that really until the last 5 years. It's been kind of seen as a protein plaque type disease. But what we see with this is that it's mitochondrial and metabolically based, and it has a very strong linkage with microvascular performance. And we're able to impact both sides of that, both the mitochondrial impacts and then also the microvascular and blood delivery impacts in these areas. And it gives us really, really good hope and optimism for seeing opportunities to identify people who are on a path for risk for these types of pathologies and get them off of that. So the earlier we can understand they're on these risky paths, and the sooner we can start these treatments, the more impactful it is for shifting them off of these paths long term. So it's a super exciting space to be in. It's also, I think, triggered, and just to kind of give, and this is a bit of a talk on this one, but we also noticed when we were treating people's guts and brains that there are powerful neurotransmitter impacts and biochemical impacts in the brain. We were seeing that for about low 80% of our users with these devices. And that, again, that's not acceptable for us. We want to have it in the high 90% to be able to be confident to be able to promote these and to deliver what we are supposed to be delivering. What we found is that the people whose guts we were treating that weren't getting the brain outcomes that we were anticipating for that were in a really heavy fight or flight autonomic distress. And one of the things that we found we could do for that is we can sense that with EEGs, and then we can treat that with transcutaneous or across the skin electrical stimulation to the vagus nerve. And so that was our impetus for launching a vagus nerve stimulation device, is sense first, understand what the problem is autonomically, and then treat that on an individualized basis. And that's a product that we'll be bringing out later this year as well, to be able to, again, help people see the benefits of the gut and brain treatments.
Really exciting future there for us. And in fact, that's a really key thing that we've been discussing with our audience is the personalization piece when it comes to vagus nerve stimulation is really important. And we've got some ideas of how we can stimulate the vagus nerve transcutaneously to induce calm or help with sleep. And it works for some people, but not everyone. You can almost have the opposite effect for some. So a personalization piece is very interesting to hear about. We look forward to hearing more from you about that when the time is right. So thank you for projecting a bit into the future and sharing some of your exciting plans there with us, Forrest. I did want to ask you one thing before we go. It's not a fun question, but it is essential when it comes to entrepreneurial activities, and that there have been some copycat devices that have shown up that might look an awful lot alike what you have produced at Kineon through your blood, sweat, and tears. Of course, this is a brilliant idea when you brought it to market, but of course, others are going to see that. What can the audience look for in terms of really being educated about making a choice between the Kineon Move Plus Pro and a competitor copycat device? What are we really looking for here in terms of the differentiation?
I think the big differentiators for us are the dosing, and key ways to find that is if you can find something that has lasers, then someone's put in the time to engineer those in, which is a relatively sophisticated engineering set versus kind of the LED only approach. And the second piece of that is, we've seen a couple of different, and it's great. Like, there's nothing better there's no better compliment than a copycat to say that you're kind of moving in the right direction. we've actually tried to start reaching out to a number of the different copycats who copy good features from our products, which again, the wearability, the low friction, the ease of travel, the modularity, the ability to kind of put these around different areas of the body and overlap multiple beam kind of structures into one area. All great things to copy. One of the things that we've seen though with the copycat versions is their dosing is just awful, and there's no kind of there's no system or meaningful approach for it. It's really just somebody's kind of going like, what's like, how many LEDs should we strap in here, and then see what we can get people to buy. And again, we don't like to knock other people's products. Our goal is to have people take on red light therapy as a great modality. And if there's great products out there that are delivering good results, we work with a number of different other companies and provide a lot of our data and support for those. We've actually reached out to some of the copycat companies and just said, look, guys, here's a better dosing model. Use this so that it's not such a poor outcome for your users, because you're going to make a bad name for the actual technology versus kind of what we're doing to put the thought and the creativity and what needs to be there to deliver the best results. And we just couldn't get any takers. And so I think most companies, and this is not to blame anyone, this is just the way the system's set up, are set up for commercial exit and success only. I think we're approaching this in an unusual way, and I think that the time and effort and energy and kind of blood, sweat, and tears we put into our dosing models and our patients and our interactions is unusual. And it's unfortunate that we couldn't get people to take that on and kind of provide better dosing for their users as well. But in the meantime, you can only control what you can control. And again, we spend a ton of time with our users and try to make ourselves as accessible and open as possible to be able to increase their outcomes and their experience with the product. So I would say in a word, they're just not as well designed and aren't going to provide the outcomes. But again, I think there's a lot that goes behind that statement that would make it less biased than it could be.
Sure. Thank you, Forrest. We appreciate your answer on that. And in pointing out that there's a lot of integrity in what you do and the work that you're trying to accomplish, so far to the point that you would share your dosing model with another competitor so that the overall brand or the overall banner of red light therapy for joint pain is not tarnished in any way. That's pretty cool. Thanks for doing that on behalf of all of us who are benefiting. Thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. We just want to see people getting better and having an alternative to pharmaceuticals. And that's what we're here for. So, and we'll continue working away at it, and really appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you about it today. I hope I haven't been down too many rabbit holes for you.
Forrest, we know you like going down some rabbit holes. That's why I'm here to steer you back and keep the questions practical. But, there's a lot of our audience that loves that science stuff, myself included. So there will be people listening to those rabbit holes and wishing you went deeper, maybe next time. Thank you, Forrest, for joining me today and all your great answers. We look forward to hearing more about the brain and the gut and where red light therapy is going to go next.
Thank you so much. I always enjoy those conversations. I really appreciate your time.